What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Sniper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now today we finish our talks on the Celestial Warlock. That's right, the Warlock that barely made the cut when we talked about it back earlier this week. Make sure to check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, we're doing a build on this and I think we're gonna have a lot of fun doing so. But before we jump into it, make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe if you haven't already. Also make sure to share the video with your friends and click the bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded. Also, if you want to support the channel just a little bit more, of course, joining down below gives you access to all of my build guides, my subclass fixes, all that good stuff drawn up in a nice document, and that way you can keep that, take it to your tables, use it in your games, whatever you want to do. It's a nice little way for me to give back for all of your support. And then of course at the higher tiers there are some other perks on there as well. Make sure to check that out down below. But what are we doing today? The Celestial Warlock is an interesting one, right? Like again, like what we talked about on Wednesday, it's an interesting one, and there are some features that I don't think are the best. However, if we're gonna go this route, we might as well embrace them. And so I've built something today that kind of takes advantage of what we've got, but we're not going so hard into it that we are, you know, putting on our blinders where we can't do anything else, because that's kind of a common trap that I see, especially with the level 6 feature. So we're gonna do a melee focused build without doing anything having to do with Pact of the Blade, which is huge, or of course having anything to do with the Hexblade. So we're gonna be going out into some weird territory, but I think we're gonna have a lot of fun doing that. So let's jump right in. As always, here are the rules for this series before we get too deep into it. So of course, if you use a different kind of stat system, just adjust accordingly, and it'll be all good there. So for our race, I'm going to go with an Eberron race this week. I normally try not to do this just because not all tables allow it. Now, of course, as 5e is beginning to somewhat be phased out, and 6e/5.5e or whatever it happens to be comes out next month, you know, there's a lot of things that are changing, and I think that a lot of people are going to adopt certain parts of 5.5e. I think some people may just jump straight to it. I think some people are going to be super hesitant and just stick with 5e and just kind of see how it goes. I'd love to know down below what you think about everything, about whether you are jumping full on into the new stuff, if you're going to just adopt part of it and then still keep the structure of 5e, or you're like, nope, I'm sticking with this, it's what I know, I'm good. Y'all can have the new stuff, I don't care. I'd love to know that down below, so let me know in the comments. But we're going with the Mark of the Sentinel human this week. Now, again, we're going to be having some honorable mentions at the very end, so if you'd like to see some other options for races, those will be there. But the Mark of the Sentinel is a really interesting, it's a really interesting take on the human, right? Normally when you hear human, you hear variant human, and then there's a feat and blah, blah, blah. We're not doing that. So technically I get off scot-free, sort of. But we get a few different features here, and most of them are pretty important. The one that really stands out to me though is Vigilant Guardian. This allows us to actually swap places with an ally that is next to us, and that ally is about to take a hit. Since we are going to be a melee focused fighter on this, we don't mind getting our hands dirty, and we're going to be finding ways to get more HP and to make sure that we can keep ourselves healthy. And of course, we also are going to be getting features that we can use to heal, and that is going to help us out a ton. So we can keep ourselves relatively healthy as a bonus action, which is great. And so we really aren't that worried. So that is one thing that I think is going to be really helpful. And of course, Spells of the Mark will come into play as we get higher and higher level. For our stats, of course, we're not going to go too weird. It's a little different than normal, but that's okay. Our highest stat is going to, of course, be in Charisma. Next, we're going to go in Strength. Actually, we want to make sure we get to a 15 there. We have our next stat in Constitution, then Dexterity, and then unfortunately, Wisdom and Intelligence end up getting put at the bottom. Intelligence, I don't really care about, but Wisdom is a little tough, it being a little lower down there, but is what it is. I mean, we gotta do something, but you could switch Wisdom and Dexterity, but generally you're gonna be better off doing it this way. This version of the human gets a +2 and a +1 to stats, and so we're going to put our +2 into charisma, and we'll do our +1 into constitution. You'll know why here in just a second. Then for equipment, we're going to grab the best wooden weapon that we can find. Now, it's really not going to make a huge difference here, but I would take a one-handed wooden weapon, and we're gonna make it work. So whatever one works out for you, that's what I'd go for. If that's a club, great. If that's quarterstaff, whatever. But just a wooden weapon, and we will go from there. And then as far as armor goes, best armor that you can get, right? We are going to have proficiency with heavy armor off the bat, so just grab the best armor you can. And of course, eventually we will work up to full plate, but we'll get there when we get there. And again, if you want a shield, if you want that, take it. If not, shield is completely optional on this build. So with that, let's start taking some levels. At level 1, I am committing the cardinal sin here that I have not done in a very, very long time, but I gotta do it. I gotta do it, and we're starting with fighter. I know. Let me know in the comments how terrible it is. I haven't done this in a very long time, but every time I do it, there's always somebody who's like, I can't believe that fighter is the first level. I came here for the... It is what it is. I really don't care. But yeah, we're starting with fighter. And I think that it is very important that we start with this for constitution saving throw proficiencies, of course, and the armor proficiencies. If we're going to be a melee focused build, we need to be resilient and we need to be able to deflect certain hits. We can't take hits forever, right? And so if we've just got light armor and a really middling dexterity, we're going to be taking a lot of hits, and eventually it's going to catch up to us. But with this, we can at least defend ourselves in a decent way. So heavy armor, absolutely, it's on the table. We are proficient. We can use it. With this, we get a few things. We are going to get a fighting style first off. I would probably go dueling here just for some extra damage on your weapon. We're going to only be using one hand, so that's extra damage. Alternatively, you could go with defense fighting style in order to gain a bonus to your AC. We also get second wind, which isn't going to be all that great on this build, but who knows? Maybe you'll need a nice little bonus action heal from time to time. I'm not going to rely on it super hard though. So we get level 2, we're going Warlock, and we're going to be there for a hot minute. We get bonus cantrips, healing light, and of course Pact magic here. We do get our subclass right off the bat at level 1, which is fantastic. For cantrips, we get light and sacred flame for free through the bonus cantrips feature, and then we get to pick a few that we want after that. I would grab green flame blade of all things. I normally would tell you to go with booming blade, but here you could take both if you wanted to, but I would at least take Green Flame Blade and then probably Eldritch Blast just to have it. If you want to really stick to that melee, drop Eldritch Blast and just go with Green Flame Blade, but I'm going to pack it just in case. For first level spells, of course, we can grab Guiding Bolt from our expanded spell list. Armor of Agathis is also a really nice one that I would bring off the bat. Other options that you could eventually pick up once you get the space for it is Hellish Rebuke. Again, I normally do not recommend this on a Warlock. It's not that great of a spell generally, but if we're going to be a melee fighter, and especially if we're switching spots and getting in there, taking hits automatically, we might as well deal some extra damage both with Armor of Agathis and with Hellish Rebuke. So that can be some really nasty damage on a reaction, which is really cool. And then of course Hex, it's a staple, gotta at least mention it. Whether you take it or not is up to you, but I gotta at least throw it in there just in case. At Warlock 2, we're going to get our Eldritch Invocations, and I'm gonna grab Agonizing Blast because Agonizing Blast. And for now, I'm going to grab Grasp of Hadar. This just allows us to pull people towards us whenever we hit them with an Eldritch Blast. Lance of Lethargy is also an option, which just makes people a little slower, but either way, I think this is nice. Now we are going to drop this next level actually once we get to 3rd level, because we want something that is contingent on our Pact boon at Warlock 3. So at this point, we get to choose one of the boons. I already said I'm not going Pact of the Blade, right? So there is one that I really want, and it is Pact of the Tome, actually. Yeah, we went Pact of the Chain last week. I'll put that up in the icon above. And then we're going Tome this week. I'm trying to keep things fresh, keep things mixed up. But we get 3 cantrips from any spell list that we want. And the most important one that we want here is Shillelagh. This allows us to attack with our charisma and not have to worry about strength anymore. Now the strength of course is still needed just because of the armor, but Shillelagh allows us to use our charisma, which is huge. I also would grab something like maybe guidance and mage hand. That allows us to have a support option. A mage hand is just incredibly good. And then at this point I would swap my invocation from Grasp of Hadar to Book of Ancient Secrets. This allows us to grab a couple of rituals, and of course one of those is Find Familiar. We don't have Pact of the Chain, but we will have a familiar this way, and that is going to be incredibly useful. Of course, with the help action, we can just have an owl that maybe it just has some black feathers. I don't know if you want it to look dark, although you're celestial, so you know you could look like Hedwig and it'd be totally fine. But yeah, and then you get another one. I'm not really super sold on what other one we really want. Unseen Servant makes sense to me. But really it's not terribly important what you go with there. For second level spells, Lesser Restoration comes online here as well through our expanded spell list. Misty Step, awesome option for teleportation, although it does suck to have to use higher and higher level spell slots for the same benefit, so one thing to keep in mind there. And then Mirror Image and Hold Person are also great options as well. At Warlock 4, we're going to be level 5, and we're going to get an ASI or feat here. I'm just going to go ahead and bump my Charisma and Strength up by 1. Now you could go with a half feat here as well that bumps Charisma, because the Strength really isn't that important anymore. But, you know, if we took something like Fey Touched, we already have Misty Step. So, you know, there ends up being a little bit of redundancy there. Although, in fairness, if you wanted to take that, then Misty Step is an extra spell for you. So definitely an option if you wanted to go that route. At Warlock 5, we're going to get no features, but we get another invocation and we get third level spells. For the invocation, I'd probably go with something like Maddening Hex. Although if you're not using Hex, I would go ahead and go back and grab Grasp of Hadar at this point as well. We also get third level spells. I'd grab Revivify just to have it in the pocket in case nobody else has it. And then of course Counterspell is really nice. Besides that, I would just fill out with some of the spells that we've mentioned earlier. At Warlock 6, we're going to get Radiant Soul. And like I said, this is a big trap because a lot of the spells here are a bit tough, but it's okay, right? We're going to embrace it. We're going to use it, and we're going to make it somewhat work, I guess. Totally fine. But yeah, this just gives us a small boost to either fire or radiant damage on one roll on one target. So it's very limited in that regard, but we can still use it on Green Flame Blade, which is good. We can use it on several things. Hellish Rebuke, of course, is fire damage, so that applies. Guiding Bolt, of course, is radiant damage. So we've got a lot of options here, and we also get more as part of our 7th level when we get no features, but we get Grasp of Hadar back if you didn't get it already. Otherwise, you can skip ahead to something else, and so we can go from there. For 4th level spells, we get things like Wall of Fire, which is a great one that I would grab. And then also from our list on the human list, again, going back to Mark of the Sentinel, we get Guardian of Faith. This is a huge one, and this is really the main selling point on our Mark spells. There are a few that are, you know, whatever, but Guardian of Faith honestly makes this worth it, especially combined with Radiant Soul. I think it's actually really nice. And then if you want another teleportation option, Dimension Door is there. So now that we have all of that, we are now level 8 going into level 9. And honestly, we get an ASI and then we get 5th level spells, but like I'm not feeling super hot on what I have right now. I want to build this out just a little bit better. So we're going to go back to Fighter now, actually, and we're going to pick up some much needed utility with that and just some toughness, really. So at Fighter 2, we get Action Surge, which is great. So this means that twice in one turn, we can take an action. So that may be 2 Eldritch Blasts, that may be casting 2 Green Flame Blades, whatever it happens to be, we can do that once per rest, which is really, really helpful. And then Fighter 3, we get, of course, our subclass. Now, everybody loves Battlemaster and Battlemaster blah, 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 blah. I'm not doing that. I don't want to do it. I want to go with the Rune Knight because Rune Knight is a lot more fun. And it also fits the theme just a little bit as well because we can take certain runes. First of all, the Fire Rune, it makes a lot of sense thematically. Is it that good? Not really, but that's okay Cloud Rune, however, makes a lot more sense thematically, and it actually works out with our flavor. So that is the rune that I'm going to be going with on this build. And then of course, Giant's Might is fantastic as well. We get to grow, we get to deal extra damage on a melee hit. It is very, very useful. So at this point, we end up at a bit of a crossroads, and we could do this one of two ways. I'm going to mention both, but I'm going to tell you which one I think is better, and that's the way we're going to go. So the way that you could go here is you could go to Fighter 5 or even Fighter 6 if you wanted to. Fighter 5, of course, would give us extra attack. Fighter 6, of course, would give us Runic Shield. And Runic Shield is pretty good, right? It's a pretty dang good feature. However, here's the issue. Extra attack does not work with Green Flame Blade or Booming Blade or whatever it is you're happening to go with. It only works with the shillelagh infused wooden stick that you're hitting people with, right? So if you're not so much worried about Green Flame Blade and just worried about whacking people with a magical stick, then by all means, go this route, go to either Fighter 5 or Fighter 6, call it a day, right? You can do that. However, to me, I think going Green Flame Blade makes a little bit more sense. It allows us to take more advantage of our Radiant Soul, that kind of thing. So I'm going to go that route and skip out on Fighters 4, 5, and possibly even 6. But it's a totally valid option. Wanted to mention that to you. At Warlock 8, we are going to go Warlock and stay there the rest of the way. And we're going to go ahead and grab Warcaster. Yes, it's late, but it's still a fantastic option, giving us advantage on our saving throws to maintain concentration and allowing us to Green Flame Blade or Booming Blade when somebody tries to leave our radius, which is awesome. At Warlock 9, we're going to get no features, but we get 5th level spells and another invocation. There's an important one that comes online at this point, and that is Gift of the Protectors. We have to be level 9 in order to get this, but it's really cool because you get to actually essentially death ward people, kind of. You get to keep people from going down if they are brought down to 0 HP, which is really, really cool. And it, of course, goes along with your proficiency bonus. Absolutely awesome feature, honestly. Great support feature. Makes a lot of sense to take that here. At 5th level spells, Greater Restoration, of course, comes online. If you wanted to drop lesser, you can, but remember that Greater does have a pretty costly component, so just watch out for that. Then Synaptic Static and Hold Monster make the most sense for other options there. At Warlock 10, we get Celestial Resistance, which is situationally pretty good. It just depends on where you're at. The resistance to radiant damage is fine, but the other parts make up for it, so that's totally fine. Warlock 11, we begin our Mystic Arcanum trek, and I'm going to grab one of two options. If you want to go the typical Warlock option, you can go with Mass Suggestion. If you want to go something that is a little bit more tuned to the Celestial, I'd go with Investiture of Flame. That makes a lot more sense with what we're doing and actually has some pretty good utility, so I would consider going that over Mass Suggestion because pretty much every other Warlock is going with that as 6th level spells. Warlock 12, we get another ASI or feat, and I'm going to grab the Tough Feat. This, of course, is going to boost our HP up, which is really nice, especially since we only have a D8. This essentially gives us the equivalent of a D10, which is pretty great. It's actually a little bit more than that, and then we also get another invocation at this point. I would grab something like Mask of Many Faces. There's not one that's particularly great at this level. We've kind of gone beyond what all of them are really doing at this point, so it's all good there. Mystic Arcanum, of course, comes back again, and we're going to grab our Power Word Pain at this point, most likely. There are a couple of other options, but this one's the best one, I think. Warlock 14, Searing Vengeance, which is pretty cool. It's your get out of jail free card. It's an explosion. If you are to get knocked down, you heal back up, all that good stuff, which is cool. And then Warlock 15, we get our 8th level spell, Mystic Arcanum. I would grab Dominate Monster or Power Word Stun. Either way is totally fine there. And then for another invocation, again, we get a lot of these back to back here toward the later levels. I would grab Beguiling Influence. Makes the most sense to me, especially in social situations. Why not? Warlock 16 gives us another ASI or feat. I'd probably just bump Constitution at this point. I don't think there's a reason to really do anything else at that point. And then finally, level 20, Warlock 17, we are going to get our final round of Mystic Arcanum, and you could go a couple of ways. Blade of Disaster is kind of cool. Could definitely do that, but there's also, of course, Power Word Kill if you wanted to go with that. So that's our build. Let me know what you thought down below. Yeah, it's a cool build, right? It's the melee version that is not the Hexblade, which you don't really see a whole lot of, right? You normally see the melee builds as the Hexblades, and that's about it. But I wanted to showcase this as a possibility. I think it makes a lot of sense. For our honorable mentions today, I wanted to go through a few of these with you. For other race options, again, you may not be able to use this race, and so you could just go with a Variant Human, right? Variant Human is always going to be a good option, giving you access to a feat at level 1, going ahead and starting that progression. Again, with anything like this, an Elven race is going to be fantastic because then you can find ways to give yourself advantage and then go with Elven accuracy, and you can do all kinds of fun stuff with that. And finally, the Furbolg makes a lot of sense here as well as a Celestial Warlock. They would probably do something like this. So I think that this is kind of a cool option. Furbolgs are awesome. So if you haven't played as one or seen one, definitely try it out. For other feat options, the Crusher feat makes a ton of sense here, right? We're whacking people with a stick. Why not be able to push them around at the same time? And then I mentioned Fey Touched, but also Shadow Touched makes sense here too. Just being able to possibly cast Darkness. And then of course you get Devil's Sight and you can see in the dark and all that good stuff. So yeah, you can definitely do something like that. And finally, other options for multi-classing, I would go with actually either a Life or Grave Cleric, which is kind of a weird option, but if you go the more Healy route, then this actually would come into play quite a bit. If you do grab some healing spells, then you actually can maximize your healing to people who are downed, which is good. Unfortunately, the Grave Cleric does not work with features. It only works with spells. So yeah, we can't combine those, unfortunately. I wish it did, because that would have been absolutely amazing. But either way, it is what it is. And then of course we can't go beyond this without talking about a Paladin option, and the Devotion Paladin to me makes the most sense. Although, who knows, if you are totally devoted, how's that going to work with having a patron? I don't know. Cool story for you to find out. Now, I wanted to mention one other thing, which I normally don't mention, but it's another way you could have played this. And that is, if you had gone with Pact of the Chain and not picked up Shillelagh this way, then you could have gotten Gift of the Ever-Loving Ones, which again is a nice bump to healing. I think that is just as a legitimate way of going about this. And if you're more focused about slinging the Eldritch Blasts, this is definitely the option that I would go with. So I just wanted to mention that as well. So that is all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Next week, we are continuing on and talking about yet another Warlock, which is going to be a ton of fun. Until then, stay safe out there, stay healthy. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.